Hi everyone, my name is Cyan, and welcome to a TLDR video for the Starcraft History Project. I really understand if you don't want to read this massive text post that I've made on Team Liquid. It's really long. It's like 4,000 words, there's a whole bunch of graphs and stuff, and I understand. So I'm going to try and make this video as condensed as possible while keeping it as full of information as possible too. What I've done is I've used a tool called the Wayback Machine, which is on the Internet Archive, to look at old pages on Liquipedia and collect data from there. What the Wayback Machine does is it logs the internet, it logs every page it can find, and what I've done is I've gone back to 2004 and then looking at the logs once every month. I've looked at as a date as close to the 29th as I possibly could because that was just when the first log was, and I've found the news post on Team Liquid that was the most commented on, and I've recorded what the news post was and the number of comments. And my goal in doing this is to form a picture of StarCraft esports outside of Korea and to see what it was and what it is that foreign StarCraft fans value most and what drove the scene to grow outside of Korea, and then excuse me, and then what happened to force the scene into decline. And the data that I've collected does show the trends that I wanted to see that would make me think this is valid. It does show growth from 2004 to 2009, and then from 2010 to 2014 it does go into decline. And I don't think that this is just indicative of TeamLiquid.net as a website or as a community. I think that as a community it is and always has been the biggest StarCraft fan site for StarCraft esports. And I don't think that I think that in saying that and in acknowledging that it is the biggest thing for StarCraft esports, I think that it's impossible to look at it as its own self-contained bubble. But you can look at it as you like. I just want to present this data and then talk about some conclusions that we reach. So from 2004 to 2009, we see this growth. And I marked down the stories that were particularly big, that were more commented on than one would expect at that time point, that fall above the linear regression, because in theory these are the stories that drove growth. They were the stories that were big enough to spill out into the world at large and for people to talk about with their friends, and this is what brought people in. And I categorized these stories into foreign scene, Korean scene, and other. And other would just be like Team Liquid specific news. Excuse me. I've been a little bit sick. I'm sorry for the coughing. The big surprise for me in 2004 to 2009 is that more foreign news stories made that list of popular articles than Korean news stories. And that's shocking to me because StarCraft Brood War was almost entirely based in Korea. There was almost no scene to speak of for very many years outside of Korea, and then the closer you get to 2009, the bigger the scene gets. But even though there was higher quality content and more consistent content coming from Korea, people still were very excited about everything that was happening outside of Korea. Not everything, but some of the big things that happened. And part of that might be because there was less of a scene outside of Korea, so when something happened, it was bigger news. But regardless, it is interesting to see that during Brood War's days, during Brood War's heyday, people really cared about foreign StarCraft, and people really wanted that to be happening and wanted that to be a thing, and were very excited for it. And I've never really understood that. I've never really gotten that impression before now. I've always thought that everyone who paid attention to StarCraft back in the day, they paid attention to Korean StarCraft because that was what it was. That was what was important. That was what we had access to at the time. And I never thought that the foreign scene was something that people got excited about. So that was shocking. 2010 to 2014, we see this decline. And to a less shocking degree, personally, again, people were more excited about foreign StarCraft stories than they were about Korean StarCraft stories. And actually, the closer you get to 2014, the more Starcraft interest in Korea falls off. And I think that that's very, very indicative of the StarCraft 2 scene and what we know about the StarCraft 2 scene. In 2013, when Blizzard announced WCS and announced that it was not going to be region locked, that players could compete in any region they wanted, what happened was a lot of top tier Koreans and mid tier Koreans went to compete in America and Europe. And this, in my opinion, looking at this data, this is now opinion stuff. This is the opinion that I draw from this data that I've collected. In my opinion, this damaged StarCraft outside of Korea. When the top 8 for WCS America are all Koreans, that doesn't look good to your casual fan. If I'm from Germany and I'm tuning into WCS Europe for the very first time, I'm probably going to identify strongly with the German players. I'm probably going to see the German flag and say, "Oh, I'm going to cheer for that guy," because we're almost conditioned in sports and competition to cheer for the home team. And the state of WCS has made it very hard for people to do that, and that presents a little bit of a higher barrier of entry for casual fans and new fans, because casual fans don't get to see their favorite streamers, win tournaments, top 16, top 8, top 4. They don't get to see that. New fans don't really get to see their nationality, excuse me, on stage, and it's harder for a casual audience to be excited for just good StarCraft, because they don't understand just good StarCraft. To them, it would just be StarCraft. During 2013, when WCS was announced and there was rumblings in the scene that this was coming, there were a lot of rumors that top League of Legends LCS teams, TSM, Cloud9, and CLG, were scouting for StarCraft divisions. They wanted to open StarCraft divisions. And at least CLG is totally 100% confirmed that they were very interested in starting a StarCraft 2 roster during this time period. And it never came to fruition. And I think that that is entirely because of the structure of WCS and the fact that it wasn't region locked or region protected or anything at all. I think that these North American and European organizations value having players from their region. They value having the local heroes and the fan favorites from around. Because it's easier for them to sell sponsorship when it's somebody who can sell their products as effectively as possible. And part of that is being from the region. A German person, I keep using Germany, I don't know why. A German person is able to sell German products more effectively than anyone from, England or America or Egypt or Korea or anywhere else in the world. It's just they're from there. They identify with the scene there more strongly. And I think that when these LCS teams, some of the biggest organizations in esports, were looking at StarCraft and they learned that it was going to be not region locked and probably dominated by top tier Koreans who were already on teams at that, I think that they really got gun shy and they wanted no part of it, because it would have been harder for them to push their brand. And this goes back to casual fans and new fans. It would have been such a big deal to have TSM, Cloud9, CLG, these huge scenes that are the biggest teams in the biggest game in esports, competing on StarCraft stages, because, again, just like nationality, it's really easy for people to identify with their favorite team. I don't watch very much League of Legends at all. I watch it with friends sometimes, and I'll throw it on in the background if there's nothing else to do. When I do watch it, I cheer for StarCraft teams. I cheer for the teams that I recognize. The same thing with Dota, the same thing with Counter-Strike, the same thing with everything. I recognize Complexity, Evil Geniuses, Team Liquid, Flipside Tactics. I recognize the teams that I know from my scene. And StarCraft is losing that very quickly. Some of the biggest teams, they don't have StarCraft rosters. Fnatic doesn't have a StarCraft roster anymore. Um, CLG, TSM, Cloud9, all these big players, they don't have StarCraft rosters, and that makes it harder for crossover to happen. Um, Even just posting stories on their Facebook and Twitter about their other divisions, that helps. Um, and going back to the nationalities, I mean, if an Australian player wins WCS and is just the best foreign player outside of Korea, that's probably going to be a news story for that player's region. Just a local interest story, and that helps. That helps to grow the scene. That helps to spark interest. That helps. And while I've said all of that, I want to acknowledge that this is not a quick fix. It would not be a simple thing to put in a region lock 100% right now and then everything is fixed. That's not what I'm saying. I think that as it stands right now, a lot of the players who were driving this kind of interest originally, like Noni and Idra and excuse me, and Grubby, they're gone. They don't play anymore. They're not relevant in the scene. Um, and it takes time. It takes work and a lot of luck to build up new people who spark that kind of excitement and fandom. And if Blizzard did put in changes for Region Lock, a lot of Koreans would have to go home. People like Jaedong, who is a huge fan favorite, people like Polt, who's a fan favorite, and that could hurt the Korean scene because these big free agents would be back in Korea taking money that was originally there for Korean teams who were just in Korea, in GSL, in online tournaments, in Pro League, all of these things. And I think that there'd be a period where a lot of Korean pros would retire because there'd be the same amount of money for more people. And honestly, for a lot of people, that would be a really bad thing. But this is where I say this is worth doing. I think that that's all so worthwhile because I think that the way to keep StarCraft as a relevant esport and grow StarCraft as an esport, you have to do that region locking and you have to really focus on growing the foreign scene in particular. Um, because it's a long-term gain that you'd be getting. While that short-term fall-off would happen, absolutely, I think. I think that in the long term, it would help a lot. And I personally don't see any reason why StarCraft 2 can't be #1 esport. I really don't. And that's a really big pipe dream. But it should definitely be bigger than what it is now. It's such a beautiful game, and it's so fun, and I love it so much. And the community is amazing. It's got all these things going for it. And I'm not in a position to comment on things like game balance or, like the skins, things like that, things like in-game things. Um, but I can do this. I can look at the history of StarCraft and I can say this is something that was really important that needed to be more important for the people in charge. For Blizzard, for the esports organizations, for teams, everyone, I would like to think that people can walk away from this with a more grounded opinion. Um, I've just spouted my opinion to all of you, but I think that the numbers on their own can stand on their own. Um, yeah, and I think that's all I need to say. I think that's all I want to say. I'm really excited to be posting this. I've been working really hard on this. I hope that, excuse me again, I hope that people like it. I hope that there are questions and stuff. I'd love to answer your questions. Please comment, tweet at me, get in contact with me however you like. I'll answer your questions. I like doing this. I want to do more content for the scene and for people. I'm really excited to do more content for the scene and for people. And yeah, thank you so much for giving me your time. I hope this TLDR was not too long. Goodbye. Thank you.